you very much, Robert. And I want to thank the Socialist Project and the Center for Social Justice and York's Department of Political Science for helping organize this event. Almost exactly a year ago, I gave a talk on a trip I made to Greece between the first and second elections last spring, the ones that brought Syriza to international attention and almost to government in Greece. And you now have the opportunity of hearing my main source. Whatever I was reporting that evening a year ago really was a matter of words being put into my ear by this guy and coming out of my mouth when I was appearing in front of you. Michalis Spourdalakis is a professor of political science at Athens University, president of the Hellenic Political Science Association, probably the best known political scientist in Greece, but most important, he is a founding member of Syriza, on its planning committee, on the ad hoc committee known as the Wise Men, that are supposed to be advising Tsipras when he has a few minutes to be able to hear them. And I must say, when I heard that he was on this Wise Man's committee, it didn't surprise me, but it made me feel even older than I usually feel, because I was Michael's PhD supervisor at Carleton University in the early 1980s when he wrote a PhD thesis on PASOK, explaining back then why PASOK will end up where it has ended up now. And he has since written, that book was published, and he has published other books, including on European socialist parties, and most important, he is in the media very often presented as the intellectual spokesperson for Greece. He won't like me saying this, but he's here because he was brought to the Left Forum in New York this weekend, and he and the Member of Parliament, a former student of Ernesto Laclau's, who is now the foreign policy spokesperson in the Parliament, were featured on a Sunday afternoon enormous plenary session. And she said at the plenary, she turned to Michael and said, "And what position do you want when we're elected? Minister of the Interior?" He doesn't want to be Minister of the Interior, and maybe he'll explain why. In any case, this is a wonderful evening for him to be here. We have an opportunity to learn an enormous amount. It's especially important because, as you may know, the public broadcasting service in Greece was closed down by executive decree in an announcement that was come into effect tomorrow morning. This led to the journalists and technicians and other workers occupying the main building. And at midnight, Greek time tonight, when the closure was to take place, there's a demonstration of over tens of thousands of people gathered outside a broadcasting house to prevent the police from coming in and throwing them out. You'll no doubt be getting petitions on this. I've already signed one, and I'm sure many more will be flying around. In any case, Michael, we're all looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Leo, and I really have to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to come back to Toronto, to come back to Canada, which is not my, as quite a few of you know, not just my second home, but it's my other home. And it's a really moving experience for me to be able to talk to friends and comrades from many, many years and to share with you the radical left's hopes and fears and think together about the future of the left here and elsewhere. Now, as Leo mentioned, today might be a very historical day for Greece, a very historical night, because what's going on in Athens right now, it might be the spark for bringing this government down and open the road for developments that we can't quite predict at that point. No matter what the outcome, however, of these developments, okay, let me give you some information. More than 10,000 people are outside the headquarters of our National Broadcasting Corporation, and this is 2 o'clock in the morning now in Athens. The Syriza's MPs are there. Other smaller trade unions representatives are there protesting for their own causes. Okay, the Archbishop of Greece made a statement in support against the government and against the closure of the broadcasting corporation, and trade unions, the bureaucratic trade unions, the leadership of these two major unions in the public and the private sectors are contemplating on having a general strike in the next couple of days. So, and the minor partners of the government, these social democrats, are opposing to the closure of the broadcasting corporation, while the Prime Minister says, okay, you take it or leave it, and I'll go to election. I'll call the election. So, probably what I have to, and I would like to share with you tonight, it might be kind of a, not necessarily Asian history, but let's treat it as a background to be able to interpret the developments ahead of us. Okay, having said that, Leo, Leo said that I'm heavily involved in Syriza. You should keep in mind that I'm not here to carry or share with you the party line. I'm very critical of my party, and this is my role, and I think that's the role of the people who pretend or they try to be the elections, to be critical and involved. The Greek left's drama, the Greek left was out of the picture for the longest time, almost since the Civil War. For 6 decades, the Greek left was not at the epicenter of the international attention. But since 2010, when the Memorandum of Stability was signed in Greece, the resistance of the Greek people against it again brought the Greek left at the epicenter of interest worldwide, and because this resistance seems to open the possibility for the long process of social transformation in Greece and elsewhere. I know that there is enough information by both mainstream and hetero and others, and enough information on the recent development in Greece. Developments that have put Greece at the forefront of the most aggressive austerity politics applied not just in the Eurozone but elsewhere. And I imagine that most of you know this, you are familiar with these developments, so I'm not going to spend much time to present them to you, but just to refresh our memory is to say that 3 years ago, as I said, it was introduced the first austerity pact in the country. And since then we have signed, the government has signed, various governments have signed 3 of them. As a result of that, the contraction of the Greek economy has exceeded 25% in the last 4 or 5 years, which has caused enormous amount of unemployment, which is right now an official rate of unemployment is 27%, and the official rate of youth unemployment has exceeded 63%, I believe. In the midst of all this, there was a tremendous resistance by Greek people. We had almost 28 general strikes, 1 or 2 days general strikes. The Indignados movement, the police confronted the people with the most harsh and authoritarian fashion. We witnessed dramatic change at the political level. We had dramatic de-alignment, social and political de-alignments. We witnessed, unfortunately, the scary development or rise of the neo-Nazi militant party of Golden Dawn. In the last year, we witnessed a scary move away from the rule of law as a base for administering public sphere, and a move towards the politics of law and order, very authoritarian practices from the part of the government. We witnessed the decay of the once very powerful Social Democratic Party and the modernizers and the current of the modernizers, the deep crisis of the Communist Party, a very odd coalition of 3-party government where Social Democrat, ex-right-wing Euro-communist, and rather very conservative, to say the least, leading right-wing party are forming our government. And in the middle of all this, of course, last year we witnessed the, as I called it, the expected miracle of Syriza into the leading opposition party with 27%. The miracle, though, is that Syriza is hopeful to form the next government. Syriza appears to be not a flash in the pan, but it's there to stay, and one has a lot to learn from that development, and this is what I would like to share with you. In other words, what I'm intending to do is, first of all, very briefly reflect on this unprecedented advancement of Syriza, then briefly sketch the developments and the actions taken in the last year, since last election. The lessons for most of us, independent socialists, people who do not only think that another world is possible, but as the leader of the party put it the other day, that another world is necessary. And there, at the end, I'm going to share some thoughts on the challenges lying ahead of Syriza and the challenges that Syriza has to face. quite often in the people's mind is that the strengthening of Syriza is the result of the extenuating circumstances caused by austerity measures. And I have to say that Syriza's success cannot be an argument in support of this idea, which in fact is a naive idea that shared by many leftists. In other words, the idea that severe crises are necessarily conducive to radical social transformation. It is a different thing to take into consideration, and this is what Syriza did, the social dynamic, and it's another thing to conclude that the social dynamic necessarily leads to the prefabricated or the pre-imagined, if you like, strategy. And for those of us who thought that the economists had the privilege to be reductionist, I think political scientists and political activists are equally reductionist, and I think we shouldn't conclude that from Syriza's development. In the late 80s, the beginning of the 90s, the Greek left, which was composed by the traditional Orthodox Communist Party, it was composed by a network or a small party of right-wing Euro-communists and a number of extra-parliamentary leftist groups, pardon me, including a good part of the old Synaspismos, which was a coalition between some of the CPers and some of the Euro-communists. These three currents chose three different strategies as the way out of their protect themselves from marginalization or their oblivion from the political sphere. There were three distinct strategies, and from this I refer to them, and these three distinct strategies mark the development of the Greek of the left today in the country. The first one was adopted by the CP, was a strategy which meant the CP decided to fence itself and fortified its membership and supporters from the contamination of other political and social forces. It separated itself from the mainstream, separate itself from other people, from other working class people and movements, and try to fence itself in a way that they can survive through that kind of strategy, and that worked for quite some time. The other group, which nowadays is in government, and it's the bunch of modernizer leftists, as I said, the ex-right-wing Euro-communists, their line is that we should get involved into politics. We should be very respectful to we have to secure our institutional presence, and we should make a difference in everyday policy. And it seems to me that these two strategies were very successful for the respectful groups and parties, because DMAR, which is the democratic left, is in government, so it succeeded. You can call this a success. And the CP succeeded to survive, however, now is in deep trouble and in a strategic dilemma, and after its last Congress, Many people predict that they won't make the 3% threshold to be to make it to the new government, the new parliament. Okay, now with Syriza it's a different story. Syriza had a political strategy actively, out of necessity, if you like, or weakness, actively found itself in a position to saying that we like to go beyond the two major traditions of the left, the tradition of the Second International and the Third International. And in the last 8 years before last year's election, Syriza has placed itself next to the social movements, and he had benefited from it. It was Syriza's people were present, actively present in the civil rights movement, in the environmental movement, in the immigrants movement, participated in all forums in the anti-globalization movement. And he participated in a way that, not in the old-fashioned way. Syriza's presence there was not to manipulate the movement or to try to substitute the movement's dynamic with the party presence in the field. On the contrary, Syriza learned the language of the movement, use and learn the political technology, if you like, and at the same time managed not to submit to the narrowness of this movement, movements that tend to have a very single issue and very narrow perspective. In other words, Syriza's strategy started in the beginning of this century, a decade ago, put itself in a training program, in a learning process, which has contributed to a quite distinct party culture, away from the stiffness of governmentalism or dogmaticism of the CP. And this was a clear departure from the traditional instrumentalism among the parties, which was very common among the parties of the left, which usually were preoccupied with securing public office while functioning inside the state institutions so as to separate their mobilization from their societal base. So usually what the left did in Greece at least, and elsewhere it seems to me, it was social mobilizations were not necessarily related to electoral mobilizations or electoral challenges. This way, Syriza articulated a very distinct strategy which is very important, a distinct strategy which, although it's in my mind has a dialectic unity, one can identify the 4 moments of it. The first is that it's the grassroots politics, activity, being active in the social field. Number 2 is non-formalistic presence in the institutions of social and political representation. In other words, Syriza's MPs, for example, are present in all mobilizations providing moral, legal, political support for the people who are struggling. And because of all this too, Syriza has put forward a very precise program, and a program which has very little to do with technocratic expressions and logic, and very much to do with the experience acquired in the social field. And finally, Syriza, especially in the last, a few months before last year's elections, put forward the call that, and the claim that radical left, yes, wants to capture power. This is very, very important because up to, say, a year and a half ago, the left, the radical left in Greece, never dared to make such a claim. Syriza did that, making also the claim that its goal is the unity of the left. By the way, let me open a small parenthesis here. Today, the entire left was present outside the protesting for the closure of our public broadcasting corporation, and there were flags of Syriza, of Athens, and the Communist Party all together, and that's a new development. Okay, so this works. All right, now the miracle of Syriza's success, it's as I said, is not a flash. It's not a flash in a pan, because Syriza got almost 45% of the popular vote for the ages between 18 and 24, and got much higher percentages than its national average up to the age of 55. So the government, or the New Democracy, the leading party, got elected primarily with the people, the eldest people's vote, not with the younger dynamic generations went for Syriza. Now, since the election, there were several developments that I would like to mention very quickly within, in and outside the party. First of all, there was a widespread disappointment. And it was a disappointment not just among the followers of Syriza, but even among the people who didn't vote for Syriza, because there was a general feeling of change, need of change. And this didn't happen. The second development has to do with the party itself, and there were two major developments in this department. The leader immediately after the election called for the unification of the party. Syriza is a coalition party. It's a coalition of some 12 or even more parties, tendencies, organizations, movements. Synaspismos, the alliance, left alliance, amounts for about 70 or 80% of its membership. However, it's a coalition. So Tsipras called for the unification of the party, and last December we had a Pan-Hellenic conference, and we agreed on a declaration of the party. Now, the declaration, take my words for this, it's a very radical and very unique declaration. First of all, states that amending capitalism, it's not on the agenda. In other words, does away with all of the reformism outright. You know, it's very clear that, and says that the strategy which is going to realize another society, which is possible, does not start somewhere down the line, somewhere in the future, but starts here and now by following certain changes that are changing every day social class relationships. At the same time, for the first time, Syriza voted, whose membership tripled within 5 months or so, voted a new central committee, the collective bodies. Before there were arrangements among the leadership of that. Now they voted new collective bodies. And Syriza, since last year, systematically, strategically, actively put a lot of effort of building a huge network of solidarity movements throughout the country, solidarity movements that on a class base are going to alleviate a little bit the hardship from the austerity politics. 2,500 solidarity networks in the field of housing, food, clothing, health throughout the country are supported by Syriza. 20% of the salaries of our MPs, 71 of them, is given directly for that cause. And of course, this is nearly as enough for the society. However, it's an indication. And what is more important is that in Syriza's program, these networks are important for answering, have a very creative, a left-wing, a revolutionary, if you like, answer to the crisis. In other words, these movements are not seen as a philanthropic kind of networks for the time being, but certainly they are not seen as alternatives to welfare state or doing away with the welfare state, but they are seen as tools for mobilizing for the future. And the second major step is going to be next month, in a month's time, in July 10th, the 3-day Congress, founding Congress of the party is going to happen in Athens, and there further steps for the unification of the party hopefully are going to take place. Also, Syriza has taken extensive initiatives, formal and also informal, class-based, at the level of mobilizing international support, not just for the country, but for the situation in Europe. At the same time, all this is happening while Syriza, along with other movements, especially the grassroots trade union movements, are trying to confront the unprecedented governmental attack against workers' rights. The economic crisis in Greece has turned into a political crisis, and the political crisis has turned into a severe, deep democratic crisis in the country, as the politics of law and order are marginalizing rights every day. Now, having said all this, I'd like to turn very briefly to decodify all this and see if we can draw some lessons, not just for Greeks, for Greece and for other constituencies and in other experience from this Greek success, which once again I have to say, it was a little bit planned, a little bit developed out of necessity, it was luck, it was a combination of things that gave life and a positive push to radical politics in Greece and to Syriza, to be more specific. Now, there are 10+1 points that I like to make here, or 10+1 thesis I like to make here. The first one is that social dynamics should always be taken, should be at the heart, of course, we all know that, of socialist strategy. But social mobilization should never be manipulated. They should always be respected. But they should not be glorified, because then the left easily can slide into populism. And we should always try to strike a balance between support and at the same time being critical of what's going on. I can explain, I can go to details on these ones later on with some examples. Point number 2, of course, working people is the primary social base of all socialists, but the necessary alliance are the result of concrete conjunctural dynamic and not theoretically predefined. In other words, if anybody, let me give you an example of that, if anybody could say that the two Greek federations of small businesses supported the general strikes and mobilized, say 5 years ago, I would have said that you are crazy, this doesn't happen. But I've seen people, small shopkeepers, who they receive on their skin, on their body, police brutality. And they wonder and say, what's going on? Why are they hitting us? We didn't do anything. It was the first time they marched together with their workers on the street. So this is, we really have to be open-minded, and that if we don't do that, and I think quite a few people make that mistake, still make that mistake, I'm afraid that Marxists turn into Plato's fans, and this doesn't help anything. Now, the program of a leftist party, and that's point number 3, is very important, because through the program we can disseminate values, social principles and priorities, and at the same time we can counterbalance the bad guys, the other side's attacks. Also, that boosts our confidence that we can do it. Yes, we can do it. At the same time, we really have to be very careful not to be, not to exhaust ourselves in many details and turn into technocratic. We should always leave lots of room for the class struggle to define to give specific solutions to very specific situations. Number 4, I already mentioned that participation in all public institutions, and particularly those of social and political representation, is very important. But this participation cannot be formalistic. I mentioned the example of our MPs and of our trade unionists. Our means Syriza, and this is very important. Point number 5, political consistency is it's very important, double talk doesn't help at all. We should not give in to the mainstream habit of reorient our position and our strategy according to the latest polls, because this is at the root of the crisis representation or legitimation crisis. This is at least this has been the case in Greece. One of the reasons that helped Syriza is the fact that the old system, the old party system, has been, because of the of this double talk, had delegitimized itself completely. Point number 6, I already mentioned this. I don't think that covenophobia, the phobia of forming the government, should be on our agenda, or even implicitly. The prospects for capturing governmental power should be always on the left, on radical left's agenda. Point number 7, more than ever before, given the depth of capitalist crisis, the socialists should avoid to move to the right in order to expand their support. And that's moderating our discourse and practice leads to major defeats. Point number 8, that's probably more controversial. It seems to me that radical left should not be indifferent to some of the modernization of the modernizers' claims and goals. However, the radical left, Syriza did that for sure, redefine these claims and put a societal, if you like, a class, giving it a class dimensions and substance to these claims. Point number 9, in the nationalism and in the national solidarity, it's a generic trait, but participation in supranational institutions should not lead to participation at all costs. Because that will give away a very static perception of what international organizations is all about, and that will give away the fact that we don't take class struggle very seriously. And point 10, the obvious question, the key question, is that party building is a key for any successful socialist strategy. The party should capitalize on the actual local experience away from organizational models that they were the outcome of the past social division of labor. And this is what Syriza did. Syriza is not a Leninist party, is not a typical mass social democratic party. Syriza is Syriza. Okay? And it was its federated form that it was able to capitalize on the multi-level and multilateral protest of the people against austerity. Now I come to the last part, and I would like to share some thoughts, and I would like to hear your reactions to this. I have some critical thoughts about Syriza, and I have some fears that I like, as I said, to share with you. Because the challenge facing Syriza is not so much whether or not it can win the next election, but whether or not it can achieve electoral success without sliding away from the radical strategy that brought Syriza here at this point. And that's very important. And to me, Syriza faces some internal challenges and some external challenges, and I'm sharing some of them with you. Some. First of all is parliamentarism. Last year's success increased Syriza's MPs by 7-fold. The needs for adjustment of the party to the new functions absorb a good part of its energy and has pushed Syriza to more conventional activity than its. Now, mind you, one has to say that more than, at least I would expect, the culture of being within the parliament, as we say, and outside the parliament, it was adapted quite quickly by the entire caucus of Syriza. However, the parliamentarism has taken away quite a bit of energy of Syriza. The other fear and the other challenge is opportunism and careerism. Syriza seems to provide an alternative to the government, and this is quite clear, and so thousands of newcomers have flooded the party's local organizations. And I don't know if there is enough time or Syriza has the capacity to educate all these people and put them in the spirit within the framework of the radical strategy and radical claims of Syriza. The other challenge is trade unionist inertia. I'll tell you what I mean with this. As the official social representation of labor, weakens, the old guard of Syriza's trade unionists seems to find it easier to move towards practices that they will replicate the PASOK and the New Democracy people within the unions. And not doing so much in the field of the unions who are not in the Federation of Labor, such as some rank and file unions, the unions of the Precariat, not trying to mobilize among the unemployed, etc., etc. So that's a thing that I'm afraid. Now, as I said, democracy is in deep crisis, to say the least, in Greece, and the fourth challenge comes from the need to protect democracy. And as the government increasingly violates basic rights and freedoms, in its effort to confront anti-austerity resistance, this is what the government does, the need for broader democratic alliances to protect democracy, it's there. And there are not broader political forces who are not associated with austerity policies to build this alliance. So if we are forced, for example, to go into an alliance with some liberals who are supporting the austerities to confront neo-Nazism, this will put Syriza into a compromising position. Formalism, electoralism, instrumentalist perception of power. It's very difficult to convince in such a short period of time and with such a weak organization that Syriza does not want to replace the government into power. In other words, does not want to continue to replicate the non-participatory political culture of the country, in the country. The mainstream political culture in the country is delegating, citizens delegating their power, as every liberal democracy, delegating their power to, to the party of our choice. Well, Syriza says and wants to turn this thing around and say we cannot do anything unless everybody participates, everybody mobilizes and all that kind of stuff. Okay? But in such a short period of time, it seems to me it's very difficult to deal with this challenge of changing challenge. Another challenge is economism. It seems to me that the hardship of the austerity politics have forced the discourse of Syriza to focus on the memorandum and austerity. And Syriza calls for anti-memorandum mobilizations, tries to mobilize on anti-memorandum. And of course, connects this to anti-neoliberal. But it stops there. There's not enough discourse and enough examples and enough initiatives that they show this is to turn this discourse of conjuncture into anti-capitalist. So it's one thing to say, okay, let's mobilize against austerity, and it's another thing is to mobilize against capitalism. Okay? And it seems to me, by implication, sometimes this economic reductionism reproduces the naive idea that social immiseration leads to political radicalism. And it's a thing that Syriza hasn't come to terms with. The other thing is very important, and also very important, is the weakness of the other left. The left outside Syriza, of course, as I said, Syriza is a very broad coalition, but the other left, the CP and the smaller ultra or semi-ultra, I don't know what it is, coalition of Adarsia are very weak. So there are not many alliances outside Syriza, and we have to come to terms with this. The other challenge is to make sure that the solidarity networks will be class-based and operate the way we plan them, and not turn into philanthropy networks. And the last one is that Syriza might come to power and has to deal with a destroyed country, a country that has no resources, no banks, no airports, no ports, no coasts, no islands, no what have you. So what is going to happen? I mean, there are three scenarios, and ahead of us, and that's come to the end. I think I already tired of quite a few people here. Syriza's scenario number one is that Syriza support will remain stagnant, and although it will be large relatively to other radical parties in Europe, won't exceed the success of PC, of the Communist Party of Italy in the 70s. That's one. The other is number two. Alternatively, Syriza will slowly transform itself from a radical to a conformist left-wing party, closer to the old-style social democracy. But to me, given the crisis in Greece and given the crisis of capitalism, this is out of the question. And the other scenario is, of course, the good scenario is that Syriza will soon come to power in such a manner that would enable it to change the social, political, and institutional balance of power and open or make the beginning of our dream to that another world is possible. Now, I would like to think and finish with this, that for us socialists in the 21st century, and given all the, and this is the 11th thesis, if you like, it's this. We should not ask what the road is, the road to socialism, to the other society, but we have to convince ourselves and to believe that we make the road while we walk on it. And that's all I have to say.